Vijayanagara Empire. The Vijayanagara Empire was established in 1336 by Harihara I and his brother Bukkaraya I of Sangamai dynasty. The founders were supported and inspired by Vidyaranya, saint of Srigengari monastery, to fight the Muslim invasion of South India. The empire rose to prominence as a culmination of attempts by southern powers to ward off Islamic invasions by the end of 13th century. The empire is named after its capital city of Vijayanagara, whose ruins surround present-day Hampi, now a World Heritage Site in Karnataka, India. Before the early 14th century rise of Vijayanagara Empire, the Hindu states of the Deccan, the Yadava Empire of Devagiri, the Kakatiya dynasty of Varangal, the Pandyan Empire of Madurai, and tiny kingdom of Kampili had been repeatedly invaded by Muslims from the north, and by 1336 they had all been defeated by Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad bin Tughlaq and the Sultans of Delhi. The Hoysala Empire was the sole remaining Hindu state in the path of the Muslim invasion. After the death of Hoysala king Veeraballala III during a battle against the Sultan of Madurai in 1343, the Hoysala Empire merged with the growing Vijayanagara Empire. In the first 2 decades after the founding of the empire, Harihara I gained control over most of the area around the Tungabhadra river and earned the title of Purva Paschima Samudradishwara, master of the eastern and the western seas. By 1374, Bukkaraya I, successor of Harihara I, had defeated the chiefdom of Arcot, the Reddys of Kondavidu, the Sultan of Madurai, and gained control over Goa in the west and the Tungabhadra Krishna River Doab in the north. The original capital was in Principality of Anigondi on the northern banks of the Tungabhadra River in today's Karnataka. It was later moved to nearby Vijayanagara on the river's southern banks during the reign of Bukkaraya I. Devaraya I emerged successful against the Gajapatis of Odisha and undertook important works of fortification and irrigation. Italian traveller Niccolo di Conti wrote of him as the most powerful ruler of India. Devaraya II succeeded to the throne in 1424 and was possibly the most capable of Sangamai dynasty rulers. He quelled rebelling feudal lords as well as Zamorin of Calicut and Kulin in the south. Dindiman was a court poet. Abdur Razak of Persia visited his kingdom. Devaraya II is the author of 2 Sanskrit works, Mahanataka, Sudhanidhi, and the commentary of the Brahma Sutras of Rudrayana. Krishnadevaraya, 1509 to 1529. After nearly 2 decades of conflict with rebellious chieftains, the empire eventually came under the rule of Krishnadevaraya, the son of Tuluva Narasa Nayaka. The empire reached its peak during the rule of Krishnadevaraya when Vijayanagara armies were consistently victorious. The empire annexed areas formerly under the sultanates in the North Deccan and the territories in the Eastern Deccan, including Kalinga, while simultaneously maintaining control over all its subordinates in the south. When Sadashiva was old enough to claim absolute power, Alya Ramaraya had him imprisoned and became the de facto ruler. Eager to take advantage of disunity among the sultanates of Bijapur, Ahmednagar, Berar, Golconda and Bidar, Ramaraya involved himself in the political affairs of the powers across the Krishna River to the north. His ploy of supporting militarily one sultanate against another, often changing alliances, brought rich rewards for a while. However, by 1563, exhausted with his intrigues, the bitter rivals from the north formed an alliance. They marched against Ramaraya and clashed with the Vijayanagara's forces in January 1565. The capture and killing of Alya Ramaraya in the famous Battle of Talikota, after a seemingly easy victory for the Vijayanagara armies, created havoc and confusion in the Vijayanagara ranks, which were then routed. The Sultanate's army later plundered Hampi and reduced it to a ruinous state in which it remains. It was never reoccupied. Tirumala Devaraya, Ramaraya's younger brother, who was the sole surviving commander, left Vijayanagara for Penukonda with vast amounts of treasure on the back of 1,500 elephants. The empire went into a slow decline regionally, although trade with the Portuguese continued and the British were given a land grant for establishment of Madras. Tirumala Devaraya was succeeded by his son. The empire went into a slow decline regionally, although trade with the Portuguese continued and the British were given a land grant for the establishment of Madras. Tirumala Devaraya was succeeded by his son Sriranga I, later followed by Venkata II, who was the last king of Vijayanagara Empire, made his capital Chandragiri and Vellore, repulsed the invasion of the Deccan Sultanates and saved Penukonda from being captured. The empire was finally conquered by the Sultanates of Bijapur and Golconda. The largest feudatories of the Vijayanagara Empire, the Mysore Kingdom, Keladi Nayaka, Nayakas of Madurai, Nayakas of Tanjore, Nayakas of Chitradurga and Nayak Kingdom of Jinji, declared independence and went on to have a significant impact on the history of South India in the coming centuries. Governance of the Vijayanagara Empire. The king was the ultimate authority, assisted by the cabinet of ministers headed by the prime minister. Other important titles recorded were the chief secretary. At the lower administrative levels, wealthy feudal landlords supervised accountants and guards. The palace administration was divided into 72 departments, each having several female attendants chosen for their youth and beauty. The empire was divided into 5 main provinces, each under a commander and headed by a governor, often from the royal family, who used to native language for administrative purposes. Rajya was divided into regions and further divided into countries, themselves subdivided into municipalities. On the battlefields, the king's commanders led the troops. The empire was among the first in India to use long-range artillery commonly manned by foreign gunners. King Krishnadevaraya's personal army consisted of 100,000 infantry, 20,000 cavalrymen and over 900 elephants. He was also called Navigada Prabhu. The capital city was completely dependent on the water supply systems constructed to channel and store water and ensure to consistent supply throughout the year. Excavations had uncovered the remains of well-connected water distribution system existing solely within the royal enclosure and the large temple complexes, with sophisticated channels using gravity and siphons to transport water through pipelines. The only structures resembling public waterworks are the remains of large water tanks that collected the seasonal monsoon water and then dried up in summer except for the few fed by springs. In the fertile agricultural areas near the Tungabhadra river, canals were dug to guide the river water into irrigation tanks. These canals had sluices that were open and closed to control the water flow. In other areas, the administration encouraged the digging of wells monitored by administrative authorities. Large tanks in the capital city were constructed with royal patronage, while smaller tanks were funded by wealthy individuals to gain social and religious merit. Economy during Vijayanagara Empire. The empire's economy was largely dependent on agriculture. Sorghum, cotton and pulse legumes grew in semi-arid regions, while sugarcane, rice and wheat thrived in rainy areas. Betel leaves, areca and coconut were the principal cash crops, and large-scale cotton production supplied the weaving centers of the empire's vibrant textile industry. Spices such as turmeric, pepper, cardamom and ginger grew in remote Malnad hill region and were transported to the city for trade. The empire's capital city was a thriving business center that included a burgeoning market in large quantities of precious gems and gold. Prolific temple building provided employment to thousands of masons, sculptors and other skilled artisans. Exports to China intensified and included cotton, spices, jewels, semi-precious stones, ivory, rhino horn, ebony, amber, coral and aromatic products such as perfumes. The ports of Mangalore, Honavar, Bhatkal, Barkur, Cochin, Kannur, Machilipatnam and Dharmadam were the most important. Chief imports from Palestine were copper, quicksilver, vermilion, coral, saffron-colored velvet, rose water, knives-colored camlets, gold and silver. Persian horses were imported to Kannur before a 2-week land trip to the capital. Silk arrived from China and sugar from Bengal. A mineral-rich region, Machilipatnam was the gateway for high-quality iron and steel exports. Diamond mining was active in the Kollur region. The cotton weaving industry produced 2 types of cottons, plain calico and muslin. Cloth print with colored patterns crafted by native techniques were exported to Java and Far East. Golconda specialized in plain cotton and Pulicat in printed. The main imports on the east coast were non-ferrous metals, camphor, porcelain, silk and luxury goods. Literature during Vijayanagara reign. The administrative and court languages of the empire were Kannada and Telugu. Telugu was a popular literary medium, reaching its peak under the patronage of Krishnadevaraya. The Kannada poets and scholars of the empire produced important writings supporting the Vaishnava Bhakti movement, heralded by the Haridadas, Brahmanical and Virashaiva literature. Kumaravyasa, the most notable of Brahmin scholars, wrote Gadugina Bharata, a translation of the epic Mahabharata. This work marks a transition of Kannada literature from Old Kannada to modern Kannada. Chamarasa was a famous Virashaiva scholar in the court of Devaraya II, wrote Prabhulinga Lile. In his court were the 8 famous scholars regarded as the pillars of the literary assembly, Ashtadigajas. The most famous among them were the Alasami Peddama, honored with the Andhrakavita Pitamaha, father of the Telugu poetry, and Tenali Ramakrishnan, Krishnadevaraya's court jester, who authored several acclaimed works. The other 6 poets were Nandi Timmana, Ail Raju Ramabhadra, Madhyagiri Mallana, Bhattumurthy, Pingali Surana, and Dhurjati. Srinatha wrote books like Mautra Charitam and Salivahana Saptasati. He was patronized by King Devaraya II, and his stature was equal to the most important ministers to the court. Notable among secular writings on music and medicine were Vidyaranya's Sangis Thara, Praudaraya's Rathiratna Pradipika, Sayana's Ayurveda Sunanithi, and Lakshmana Pandita's Vaidya Rajavallabham. The Kerala school of astronomy and mathematics flourished during this period under such well-known scholars as Madhava, who made important contributions to trigonometry and calculus, and Nilakanta, who postulated on the orbitals of planets. Architecture of Vijayanagara Empire. Vijayanagara architecture is a vibrant combination of the Chalukyan, Hoysalan, Pandyan, and Cholan styles, idioms and prospered in previous centuries. In stylic hallmark is the ornate pillared Kalyana Mantapa, Vasanta Mantapa, and a Daraya Gopura. Artisans used the locally available hard granite because of its durability, since the kingdom was under constant threat of invasion. While the empire's monuments are spread over the whole of southern India, nothing surpasses the vast open-air theatre of monuments at its capital at Vijayanagara, UNESCO World Heritage Site. In the 14th century, the kings continued to build Vesara, or Deccan-style monuments, but later incorporated Dravidian-style gopurans to meet the ritualistic needs. The Prasanna Virupaksha temple of Bukka and the Hazare Rama temple of Devaraya are examples of Deccan architecture. The Prasanna Virupaksha temple of Bukka and the Hazare Rama temple of Devaraya are examples of Deccan architecture. At Hampi, though the Vithala temple is the best example of the pillar Kalyana Mantapa style, the Hazara Ramaswamy temple is the modest but perfectly finished example. Another element of Vijayanagara style is the carving and consecration of large monoliths such as Sasivekalu and Kodelkalu, Ganesha at Hampi, the Gomteshwara monolithics in Kankala and Verlur, and the Nandi bull in the Lepakshi. Vijayanagara art includes wall paintings such as the Dashavatara and Girija Kalyana, marriage of Parvati Shiva's consort, in the Virupaksha temple at Hampi, and Shiva Purana murals at the Veerabhadra temple at Lepakshi, and those at the Kamakshi and Varadaraja temples at Kanchi. This mingling of the South Indian styles resulted in a richness not seen in earlier centuries, a focus on reliefs in addition to sculpture that surpasses that previously in India. The great platform has relief carvings in which the figures seem to have the facial features of Central Asian Turks, who were known to have been employed as royal attendants.